Today, I'm going to show you live of how I convert a fairly complex workflow that I built into a relatively intuitive one using sub-workflows. In general, there are three key benefits that sub-workflow nodes can bring. The first is if you intend to sell AI automation solutions to your clients, then using sub-workflows can really help to make your overall parent workflow a lot more intuitive and easy for your clients to understand, which will then increase the perceived value of your service. The second benefit is it helps you build future workflows a lot faster with sub-workflows as reusable components. And then the final benefit is you'll be able to leverage parallelization on your sub-workflows that will massively accelerate the time taken to run each of your workflow. Now, with that said, a common challenge that beginners face is not knowing when and in which specific part of their workflow to be applying these sub-workflows. So my promise is by the end of this video, I will clear your doubts and give you a clear decision framework that you can use on utilizing these sub-workflow nodes. Alright, so before I actually go into this workflow and start making changes to it, applying sub-workflows, etc., I just want to give you a quick context on the genesis of this workflow. I was trying to solve two problems. One is there isn't a built-in automation on the hobby plan in SKOOL. And so I needed like a hacky way for me to go about this. And the second problem that I was trying to solve is the longer the time taken to approve each of these members, then the less engaged they will be in the SKOOL community in general. And this is just psychology because you got to strike when the iron is hot. My way of solving this problem is that I will take a screenshot of each applicant, which looks something like this here. So they will provide me a few details, right? The first is which YouTube video brought them into my SKOOL community. And then the second question is what is their aim out of the SKOOL community? And then finally, what is their best email? And so I will take a screenshot of this applicant, for example, and then I would then shoot it into my Telegram bot, which would then extract all the information and then store all of those information into my own database. And so once this is done, I can just go ahead and approve it even when I'm on the go. For example, if I'm in the car, I can just do a quick screenshot, send it into my Telegram, and then just click approve. So in that case, I don't need to wait until I'm home, open up my laptop, copy paste each of these details into my spreadsheet, and then finally click approve, which is already like an hour, 2 hours later or something. And so the way that I've implemented this is I'll have AI analyze the image and extract the information, which is the 3 items that I mentioned. And then after that, we would validate if the email is accurate. And the reason for this specific part of the workflow is because oftentimes the AI image model might include a character into the email or accidentally omitting a certain character within the email. And so this is just a way for me to check if the email that has been extracted is actually correct or there's some typo in it. But if it's correct, then you go on to the next step, which is checking if the source provider is a link or a video name. And the reason for this is because even though in my question here, I've clearly stated that, please provide the exact title of the YouTube video, but then you still see some people will provide the link instead of the name of the video itself. And so this is just a way for me to just cover both scenarios, whether it's a link provided or it's the name of the video. So in case it is the link, then I would have an AI agent that would then convert the link into a video title, which would then be stored into my spreadsheet. Or if it's a name, then it can just be conveniently stored into my spreadsheet. All right, so with that said, let's now move into N8N and let's see how each of these components kind of maps to each part of this process here. You'll see in this first part of the workflow, we have get image file, analyze an image, and then parse data. So this is where the information extraction happens, which is what you see here. And then after that, we will validate the email, which is what's going on here. We are using this software called hunter.io, and essentially what it does is we can fill in an email and then it will give us whether or not this email is deliverable, meaning whether it's legitimate or not. Depending on whether or not the email is legitimate, then we will say if it's not legitimate, can you please message me again on Telegram and let me provide you the email based on what I see, and then you can process it accordingly, which is what happens after this note here. But if the email is correct, then we move on to the next step, which is checking if the source provider is a link or a video name, which happens here, right? So it says, determine if link is provided, which is a YouTube video link. If it is not provided, then we're essentially going to be routing it to 2 different kinds of microservices. If it is a YouTube link, then it will pass into this YouTube agent that will then convert it into my video title. And if it's already in the title format, or sometimes people might just even give you like a random name. Like let's say if I have a video about tracking LLM tokens, then they will just say monitor costs or something like that. And so this is where this part of the workflow will try to match whatever they have provided semantically to the exact video title that I have. And the way that I've done this is I provided it a spreadsheet here, which would contain the list of videos that I have, the exact titles. And so it will then perform a fuzzy match based on the name that the user has provided against the actual title of the video. But in the case where they have provided the exact title, then it will just go straight into creating the record in my spreadsheet. Okay, so now moving on to how we will then convert this fairly complex workflow into a simpler and intuitive one using sub workflows. I would just want to walk you through these two sticky notes first. So in general, there are 4 rules that I typically use when I decide on whether or not a specific part of a workflow can be converted into a sub workflow nodes. And so this is the decision criteria that I would use. So the first is, does it serve one specific function? And what I mean here is, for example, if you look at this section here, all it does is analyzing the screenshot and then extracting the information. So it kind of serves only one purpose, which is to take a specific input, perform one specific action, and then get an output out of it. So if it fulfills this criteria, then we can move on to the next one, which is, does it improve the clarity of the parent workflow? For example, for this specific part of the workflow, if we were just to include, an execute sub workflow node, which is named after analyze image and extract information, instead of having these 4 nodes here, we could just have this one node. Wouldn't make it a lot simpler for our clients or ourselves to understand what the workflow is doing? Because sometimes there's just a lot of noise, unnecessary noise, that you can just abstract it away in a single node and still retain the meaning of the parent workflow. Which brings me to my third point of retaining the meaning and logic of parent workflow. What this simply means is you don't want to over abstract your workflow, in the sense that you can almost imagine a scenario where someone can say, okay, you know what, how about I replace this whole thing as a single sub workflow node? And this node here would essentially represent the entirety of this part of the workflow here. Then that wouldn't make sense, right? Because then all of the meaning of the workflow is lost, even though it looks very clean. But it doesn't make sense, because what are you going to label this node as? First of all, you're analyzing the screenshot, you're ensuring email is valid. So are you just going to say like analyze screenshot, ensure email is valid, and then store in Google Sheet? It makes it become very confusing, because you, even yourself or your client, wouldn't really understand like what exactly is happening inside here. Whereas if you break it down instead into separate sub workflow nodes for each of these stickies, for example, then it will become very clear, because then this part of the sub workflow, you're doing one specific function. This second part, you're doing one specific thing, so on and so forth. So you want to make sure that when you use sub workflow nodes, just make sure that you keep it to one specific function. That way, you also already fulfill retaining the meaning and logic of your parent workflow. And then finally, can it be reused? And this is like a bonus, because sub workflows doesn't necessarily have to be reusable. Sometimes if it just helps improve the clarity and logic of the workflow, then I think that's already sufficient. Okay, so with that out of the way, now we're going to look into how we're going to apply our sub workflows. So this is the flow that I usually follow when I implement my sub workflows. The first is I'll ring fence and label parts of the workflows, like how I did here. And then the second is I'll run each of these stickies through the decision criteria here, and then see if it makes sense for me to convert it into a sub workflow node. And then I'll go ahead and implement them, create new workflows, and then making sure that the data flows properly. Then I will see if they are reusable components. And if they are, I would store them accordingly. For example, I have a dedicated components folder where I just store all the reusable components that I can use for future workflows. And then lastly, we'll talk about parallelization and how you can use it to benefit your workflows. All right, so the first step, ring fencing and labeling. Essentially, what I would always do is I would create stickies like this, and then I would ring fence parts of workflows that covers one specific function. For example, in this case, we are analyzing a screenshot and extracting information. And if you want to be even more detailed, you can almost say, the first part is analyzing screenshot, and then after that you have extract information. So let's just do that, right, for clarity. And then we have extract information here. But since this is just, one part, it's just one node, so I don't think it makes sense to convert it into a sub workflow in general. So let's keep it, let's just keep it like that without a sticky note around it. And then this part here is essentially using Hunter.io to check if the email is valid. and then do some actions after that, right? For example, getting the emails or determine if the link is provided. So ensuring email is a valid part actually is only really in this node right here. And then the rest of this is just like conditional logic to route. And then subsequently, we have the routing function. And to be honest, I think routing could be almost like that. But I think in this case, what I meant by routing is more towards what kind of actions that we want to take, whether it is finding the video based on the provided link or finding the video using the provided title. And so in this case, we're going to be limiting the router logic to only this LLM here that essentially checks the provided link and then determining whether or not it is a link or a title. And then we have these two workflows here, which essentially goes ahead and find the specific YouTube video title through different methods. Okay, so now once we have ring-fenced this, the next step is to then run each of these sticky nodes through a criteria. Okay, so if we look at the first part of the workflow, analyzing screenshot, does it serve one specific function? Yes, because it only analyzes screenshot. And does it improve the clarity of the parent workflow? We have a Telegram trigger, we send a chat action, and then if the valid is request, then we would have just an execute start workflow node, which would then say analyze screenshot. Then once it has analyzed the screenshot, it will then pass all of the information that it extracted into this node here, which essentially converts it into a easily digestible format, which is something like this here. Because as you can see, if you look at this analyze an image node, you'll see that the text is pretty much very free form in some sense. It's just like a bunch of text. And so what we want to do is we want to convert them into specific attributes that we can just drag and drop as values. And then the third question, does it retain meaning and logic of parent workflow? I think yes, right? Because having these three nodes here is just a lot of noise. And all it does is one thing, which is extracting information from the screenshot. And so you can have just one node that represents that. I think that would make the workflow a lot cleaner and also preserving the meaning of the workflow as well. And then finally, can it be reused? I think this is a bit more subjective. We'll think about that later. I think just based on the criteria right now, we've already passed like 3 of them. So I think this is definitely a goal. We can use this. All right, so then if you look at the next one, ensure email is valid. I would say that this also similarly meets all the criteria, except this is only one node. And I wonder if this is useful to actually convert it into a sub workflow unless I kind of like ring fence it this way. But I don't think that it really makes sense because this becomes very specific to this workflow, right? Because it is not so common to prompt or have a human in the loop that would provide an email manually. In this case, we are doing that because in earlier part of the workflow, we are using an image analyzer model to extract the email. But if let's say, if this email is coming from somewhere like another data source, then most of the time the email will be correct. So I don't think it will make sense to convert this whole thing into a sub workflow. And what I would do is, what if it's like that? Does it make sense? Probably not as well, right? Because it has like 2 paths flowing out of it. And if I was to use a sub workflow, most of the time it would just be one path coming out of it. So I wouldn't be able to facilitate for this logic here. And then if I think about it like that, then it wouldn't make sense because it's just one node. So I might as well just keep it, with this hunter node here. So I'm just going to delete this because it doesn't make sense. It serves one specific function, yes, but it doesn't really help to improve the clarity of the parent workflow. And whether or not we have the sub workflow, the meaning and logic is still the same anyway. There's no incremental benefits to it. And it can't really be reused if we kind of like ring fence over 3 nodes. So I think in this case, we'll not be applying the sub workflow. And then for this router here, I think this is also very specific to, as we previously discussed, is very specific to this particular workflow. And if you just run it through this decision criteria again, does it serve one specific function? Perhaps. But then does it improve the clarity of the parent workflow? I think not, because imagine if you have like a sub workflow. Yeah, let's say if we have this node instead of this whole block here, then again, we wouldn't be able to, I don't think technically we can do this because there's only like one path coming out here. and we can't really. I feel like at the end of the day, if there's an if node at the end here, then we can't really use a sub workflow. If there's an if node that is on the last node of the ring fence, your ring fence part of the workflow, then it wouldn't make sense to use a sub workflow. And then if we then move this down to this, then again it wouldn't make sense to use a sub workflow because it's just one-to-one, and there's no benefit in implementing a sub workflow here. And so with that said, I don't think it makes sense to use a sub workflow, so we'll keep that. So far we are only using a sub workflow for analyzing screenshot, and also for this particular part of the workflow here. I mean, sure, you can argue that it can be reused, but I don't think it's too hard to just include one node here, right? It's not much difference in terms of time saved. So in that case, I think it doesn't really make sense to use a sub workflow node. And then after that, we have find video using provided link. I think here it makes sense to use the execute sub workflow node, and let's go through the decision criteria. I'm just gonna bring it here. So does it serve one specific function? Yes. Does it improve the clarity of parallel flow? I think yes, because if we replace this whole chunk of the workflow here to just, find video using link, like this, and then we can kind of like go straight here. Instead of going through all of these things, it will just be one thing here, and then once that is called, it will then go ahead and append the row and then confirm log all within this node as well. So in that way, it's very clean. Moving down to find video using provider title, I think we can also apply the same sub workflow here like this, and then rename this to find video using. Once this is done, it will then pass it down to this sub workflow, and then within this sub workflow, we'll then go ahead and perform everything that is being done here. And the reason why this passes the criteria is because, first of all of these things essentially serves one function, which is you want to find the video. You want to find the exact video title based on whatever the user has provided you, which is this value here. So it serves one specific function, and it also helps to increase the clarity of the parent workflow, because now instead of having all of this logic here, they're all abstracted within this one workflow. And I think it definitely makes sense to do that, because all of these things serves one function anyway. So why not just hide them under one single node and just rename the node accordingly, and just makes it a lot clearer. So then what you get is, after this if node, you only have two nodes that comes after it. One is you're finding the video using the link, which is this, or you are finding the video using provider title. That's it. And it retains the meaning and logic of the parent workflow still. Maybe not too reusable, but it still serves a very good reason to be in this workflow, in the sense that it massively increases the clarity of this workflow. So now that we have gone through all the decision criteria for each of the sticky nodes, we're going to actually start and implement the sub workflows, right? And make this happen. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy this flow. I'm gonna create a workflow here, and I'm gonna copy it over. And then typically what you want to do is you want to create a trigger, which is this when executed by another workflow. And then we want to know is the data is being passed into this workflow. And typically how I do that is I would check if there's any data that is being passed in from this if node here. For example, in this case, you can see that it's actually taking from Telegram trigger. And so we want to make sure that the data from the Telegram trigger is being passed into this node. And we want the chat ID and image. They are the first one is number, and the second one is text, as you can see here. Okay, so number and text, so image. And then we have the chat ID, which is a number. And then now you see that if you click inside here, you see that it will be reflected. Let me just rename this as well as analyze screenshot. The way usually I do is I just copy the ID over, and then I change it back into list, and it would reflect the name of the workflow typically, but in this case, it's not really doing it for some reason. But you see that the input is already reflected here. And so I can just pass in the image. And the one that I used was this, so I'm just gonna copy this image, expression image, and then the chat ID. And then run once with all items, because we only have one item anyway, so it doesn't really matter which one that we use in this case. So we're gonna do this, and then I'm just gonna detach this and move this up. And now I'm going to test run it, right? I'm going to test run it and see if it works. Reference node doesn't exist. Huh. Why is this happening? Oh, okay, I see what's going on here. So basically, this will not be Telegram trigger anymore because there's no Telegram trigger node in this subworkflow. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say JSON instead, which essentially refers to the previous node, which is this node. So JSON dot message, actually JSON dot chat ID, because we're passing in the chat ID attribute here. So we're going to say chat ID, and then image would be JSON dot image. I shouldn't change this to small caps. Image, and then JSON image. Yeah, I think that should work. Let's try that again. Back request, please check your parameters. Okay, let's see what's going on again. Okay, so now it's this, right? So now we have an issue here in the sense that it is referring to big caps image, but what we want to make sure that it matches the attribute of the previous. Oh, the image is now. Why is the image now? Okay, so it seems like, okay, I think that's because, yeah, I'll need to reset this value here. Let me just copy from here again. Image expression. And then this is a string, that's correct. You will set this here, and then I want to call this image file. Okay. And I just want to make sure that this is also correct. Yeah, this is binary file. I think that's fine. Okay, I think that should work. Let's try it again. Just give it a moment to load. Okay, now we can see that it is successful. And we have gotten the results from the image analysis, the Google Gemini image analyzer. So that's fine. So this is done. So we can just remove this and then remove this as well. So that's one subworkflow out of the way. And now we need to implement the other tool, which is the YouTube side of things. So let me just clean it up now by just hitting a quick control. I don't think we need this router as well, but we just keep this just to label this workflow. Now delete this. And so with this, what I'll do now is I'll copy all of this. I'll create a workflow and then put it here, and then do the same thing, execute subworkflow. And then I'll see what attribute do I need, which I need the YouTube video attribute. And so that is the only thing that I essentially need to pass into this workflow. Let me just rename this as this. Okay. And then I'm going to copy this ID, execute subworkflow node, execute, and then ID, copy ID, and then change it back to list, and you'll see that it kind of like changes to the name of the workflow. And now we haven't set any input yet, so we'll just need to add some input here. And the one that we need is the YouTube video. And then I'm just going to change this to JSON.YouTube video. And so now, let me just check if there's any variables inside here. No, there's no variables, that's fine. And then I'm going to then pass it in here. And I'll need to pass the YouTube video in. And the way that I get it is through this parse data. But for me to do it, for me to get that attribute, I'll need to run all of this. So let me just run it quickly. All right, so now that I've run the workflow, you'll see that I have the data now. So I'll get it from parse data and then YouTube video. Okay, let me just call this and see if it works. Just call this. And so if it works, then I'll just go ahead and delete this again because we already have it here. And then we do the same for this part of the workflow as well. While this is working, I'm just going to do the same thing for this part of the workflow here. So copy this, and then I'm going to actually remove this city, and then move shifts a little bit just now. I'm going to copy this, and then create a new workflow, copy it over, and execute trigger. Put this. And then I'm going to rename this to find video using provided title. Copy the ID over. Change it back to list. And then I'm going to have a look at what kind of input that I require here. So I would need This, I don't think I need anything from here. Fuzzy match. Yep, I'll need parse data, the YouTube video name again, and the title from the aggregate node. Okay, so that's the two things that I need. So I'm going to actually configure this, right? So I'll need the title and YouTube video. They're both string, so that's fine. Save this, refresh. So I'm gonna get the title from the aggregate node. Where's the aggregate node? Oh wait, the aggregate node is here. So technically, I don't need, yeah, this is fine. I don't need this. I only need the YouTube video actually, sorry. So I'm just gonna delete this and then pass in the YouTube video from parse data, YouTube video. Yep, save. Let's remove this. This is fine. And then I think I can go ahead and remove all of this. And this is taking a while to, okay, we have a problem here. Reference node doesn't exist. Let's check what's going on. Okay, so this is correct. But all right, so it needs some details from parse data, which I'm not passing into the node at the moment. So what I need to do is actually to include those as well. So what I'm missing is email name and email name and aim. Okay, I'm gonna save this and I'm just gonna configure that. So I need the email name and goals. Okay, I think that should be good. Let me just run this again just to make sure it works. I think it should work because that's the only thing that ran into an error. The rest is fine. So I'm just gonna go ahead now and delete this. And I'm gonna delete this as well because that's pretty clear in the name of the node here. So with that said, I think we're done. Let me just clean this up. Shrink the router and then yeah. So as you can see, our workflow is now a lot cleaner because let's just walk through it step by step, right? So we have a Telegram trigger, which means that every time when there's a chat action that goes in the Telegram, it will trigger this workflow. And then we set a chat action, which just shows like the typing interface within Telegram, just to show that the bot is actually working. And then we have a router here, which says if the valid request is true, oops, what is wrong with the workflow again? Reference node, oh yeah, because we did not change the variable here unto, say, oops, wait, no, it shouldn't be curly braces, what am I doing? Like this, and then first, and then we have, this is name, dot first, dot JSON, dot naming, that should be correct. Let me just test this, right? So one of the ways that I usually test it is I'll just copy this. So I'll just copy this here. Unique name goes name, email, aim, and YouTube video, right? In this case, we'll say YouTube video. So we're just gonna save that. Save it. So we have now pinned this here, and I'm just gonna test run this so that I can just work with the data right here. But I think I can probably already start with this. So when executed another workflow, first .json and then name, and then conversion source, I think you can use it from JSON, which is what the agent gonna provide, and then we have aim. Yeah, okay, now this is good. Okay, I'm just gonna save this, and then I'm gonna pause this actually because I don't need it to run anymore. And then I'm gonna try it again. Okay, I'm gonna try it again. I'm gonna pin this so that I don't have to rerun it. Pin this as well. Okay, and then pin this as well. Okay, so I'm just gonna re-execute the entire workflow and then let it run here. Okay, so while it's working, let me just continue explaining where we left off. So we will check if the request is valid, and then we'll analyze the screenshot. We'll parse the data into a specific format that we want, which is in this specific format. Name, YouTube video, goals, and email. We'll check if the email is valid via this tool here. And if the email is valid, we will then determine if the YouTube video, the name provided is a link or a title. If it is a title, we will call this, which is we'll find the video using the link. And if it is not a link, then we will just find the video using the provided title instead. So as you can see, the logic is all intact. Just by looking at this, you understand what the whole workflow essentially does. It now became very clear of what the workflow is doing instead of having what we have. Instead of having something like that, which is like, sure, it looks like, wow, there's a lot of things going on, but it just makes it a lot more confusing of like, what is going on in each of these nodes here, what are you doing, right? Instead of like, oh, what is this AI agent doing? Your client doesn't need to know if you're using an AI agent or whatever method that you're using to achieve a specific function. All they need to know is that this is what you're doing at this particular moment in time. And as long as it's worked out. And so yeah, this is how you use sub workflows to increase the perceived value of your service by making it extremely clear and intuitive. And also at the same time for, things like analyze screenshot, if I speed up the time that you build your subsequent workflows. In this example, we are not really using parallelization because each time when I run the Telegram bot, it was only feeding in one screenshot. So I don't really need to parallelize anything because I only have one input. But imagine if you have like 1,000 or 1,000,000 inputs and each input you're going to be running it through an AI agent, for example. Then if you're not using parallelization, meaning you have to wait for each input to be done processing before moving on to the next one. Whereas parallelization, you can do all of them at a single point in time altogether, which makes it a lot quicker. Because let's say if one input takes you about 1 minute to process, then for 1,000,000 input you need 1,000,000 minutes. Whereas if you can do parallelization, then you can essentially say for 1,000,000 inputs, you can all process it. You can finish processing everything within 1 minute. So it just save you insane amount of time. And the way that you can set this up is you can go to your sub workflows and then you can say mode as run once for each item because you want to pass in one at a time and then you want to execute all of them in parallel. So you start off by setting this to run once for each item and then you would add an option here and turn this off because you don't want to wait for your sub workflow completion. You want all of them to run together at the same time. So that's how you will set this up, but in this case, I will not because it doesn't make sense for my use case. Also, another thing that I wanted to cover is if let's say, you have a specific component or sub workflow that you think is reusable for future workflows, usually what I would do is I will save them in a dedicated folder. So let me just show you how I do it. Right? I'll have this components folder here and you'll see that I have all of these workflows that are essentially workflows that I think I can reuse in. I'll just store, for example, in SKOOL. So let's say I think that analyze screenshot can be reused and I want to store that in a dedicated folder. And so what I can do is I can just move this to components and I can just move the workflow over there. And so next time when I'm implementing a new workflow, for example, I can just always look at this components folder and then just use any existing sub workflows that are already ready. We keep getting an error. Let me just see again. Oh yeah. Okay. My bad, guys. I am very absent. Debug this in editor and then pull this over. Yeah, okay, so now I think if I run this, so yeah, so we have a working workflow now. So that's the end of this video. I hope you got some value out of it and that you have a clear decision framework that would help you at least make better decisions when it comes to implementing sub workflows in your own AI automation workflows. Also, if you want to learn more about any other related techniques, make sure to check out my free SKOOL community where I post updates, things I'm working on, and you get to vote what types of video you want to see next. And apart from that, there's also a whole community of NAN enthusiasts that will be able to grow alongside you in this AI automation journey as well. And if you enjoy video like this, make sure you hit the like and also subscribe to my channel so that you will be notified when similar videos like this gets released in the future. In the meantime, you can check out this NAN fundamental principle video that I released that is perfect for beginners who are just starting out and want to make sure that they know all the right fundamentals and best practices before implementing their AI automation workflows. Alright, thanks for tuning in and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.